Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Comic Boom Comic Source collaboration. Time for Indie Spotlight for the week of January 29th, 2025. It's a fifth Wednesday in the month, which typically means a smaller week. That certainly was the case with our DC Spotlight. You can check out the DC Spotlight over on Rocky's YouTube channel, Comic Space Boom, ! Once you're there, like, comment, subscribe. Obviously, comment and let us know what you thought of the DC books. This week, there are a couple anthologies, Green Lantern, Superman Lex Luthor special. So some decent titles and also some titles that were a little meh. But don't forget to ring that notification bell as well so you know when new content is coming out. So even with a smaller DC week, it definitely wasn't a smaller independent week. And we were just talking about kind of the distribution troubles, if you will, that it's going on right now. Everything's sort of up in the air. With the Diamond bankruptcy, and especially for Rocky up there in Canada, who knows what's going to happen. Diamond is selling off, from our understanding, in the bankruptcy in order to raise funds, selling off Diamond International, which distributed to Europe and other places. But it was sort of the North American main Diamond that was distributing to Canada, but with everybody leaving Diamond, I mean, everything's going to be up in the air, so who knows. So I say all that to say, hey, it's a good thing, Rocky, that we get these digital press copies. At least you'll be able
That's right. That's exactly right.
To still read stuff, and hey, it'll be a little nice reprieve for your pocketbook if you're not buying the physical
This
copies.
is true, yes.
So, but yeah, it didn't necessarily feel like a smaller week when it comes to independent titles. So we're going to dive right in with the first book we're going to talk about from one of our favorite publishers, and I'm wondering why did I disappear? You guys can't see me. There I am. Now you can see me. There you go. There's my smiling face.
There you go.
All right, so it's Redcoat. We're up to number 9. We knew this issue was coming with Johnny Appleseed. And yeah, I'm definitely curious to get your take. This has been an interesting title in the way that we look at it from our perspective. Me being American, growing up, learning about American history and what have you. And you decidedly not being in that position. This has been frequently your favorite Ghost Machine title. So, written by Jeff Johns, he's credited as a creator along with Brian Hitch, who handles the art. Andrew Curry and Brian Hitch are credited as inkers. Brad Anderson on colors. Rob Lee on letters. So give us your thoughts on Redcoat number 9 here with Johnny Appleseed.
It's a great one-shot tale, and we know we're going to get other stories. Jeff Johns does have other stories that he will tell, starring Johnny Appleseed, as he is in the life occasionally of Simon Pierre, our somewhat reluctant hero, and this is a lot of fun. I don't know what it's like for you in America, but I mean, Canada, we actually do get I get a sense, and I might be wrong, I get the sense that at least when I was growing up, we actually did learn a little bit of American history in school. So we did, I have heard of Johnny Appleseed, and just like with George Washington, just like we've heard of the traitor Benedict Arnold, and sort of the big ticket names in American history I have heard of. And I love that Jeff Johns is actually in such a way, he's adding some mystical elements, some superhero-like elements, he's adding to the myth of these historical figures in a way in the life of Simon Pierre of Redcoat in a way that sort of enhances the narrative and actually makes American history so interesting toward this unknown war, which is a larger narrative encompassing all of the Ghost Machine titles. And this is just a wonderful one shot, focusing on Johnny Appleseed, bestowing, in American lore, he's someone who was beginning of dealing with, my understanding, dealing with apple seeds and horticulture and agriculture and what have you. Well, I guess he had some insights. He could see the good in people. He had some mystical abilities, magical abilities. He definitely knows how to, that old expression, what do you think of them apples? Well, Johnny Appleseed, wow. It's funny, you got Simon Pure and then you got Johnny Appleseed, and Johnny Appleseed really can see the good in people, and just like and appropriately he uses the analogy Simon Pierre. He relentlessly has such a negative opinion of himself. Simon, he thinks that he's not a good person, that he's ultimately always going to end up doing the wrong thing. Well, Johnny Appleseed sees through all that, and it's very interesting, and it's through the insights of Johnny Appleseed that. Through once again, just like when we got insight through the mind of a younger and older Albert Einstein, we know that Simon Pierre is more heroic than he gives himself credit for. And it's funny, as it's ironic that the more Simon Pierre talks about how much he's of low quality of character, the more I realize his character is actually of quite high quality. And it's that. Not to use that old Batman movie expression, but something along the lines of, Simon Pierre probably really is turning into the hero that I think the present, the past, present, and the future is going to need, because the hero's journeys that he's on, it really is fascinating. And this here, just a fun adventure with Johnny Appleseed, with giant worms, giant apples. Helping townsfolk. It's humor, fun. It really makes you. It makes you love the atmosphere. I'm more tempted to. I don't know not much about Johnny Appleseed other than what I said, but. I suspect that Jeff John's history of origin of Johnny Appleseed is much more exciting than the real thing, of course. But this was a really fun tale. High recommend from me, and I didn't enjoy it quite as much as the sort of like the standalone with Albert Einstein, but it was still very heartfelt, and again, more character revelations and hints as to what's to come for Simon Pierre and for Johnny Appleseed. So, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Albert Einstein issue because, it's very. We've had several standalone, right? Like we had the Albert Einstein issue, which was very emotionally grounded, and did lean into the fact that. Yeah, a lot of times Simon sells himself short. He tends to do the right thing, even if it's reluctant at times, but certainly Albert saw the best in him. Then we had the sort of the horror story, if you will, where Simon found himself beset by this just evil family. And now here we have him with by all accounts, Johnny Appleseed was a very positive person. He's friends with Simon, and again, like you said, Johnny Appleseed certainly sees the best in Simon. And this is a standalone that's more grounded in sort of the fantastical. It's still a very positive message, and re-emphasizing that point that Simon does sell himself short, and he does tend to do the right thing. It's a little more on the nose with the conversations that Johnny and Simon have. And I will point out that at times. This is a very heavily scripted issue. Just look at all that dialogue on that page here. We like even more. I didn't know better. I think Bendis wrote this, but it's needed because it gives a lot of perspective. Because all these little dialogue boxes here, they're basically like Simon Pierre's journal, if you will, giving us his thoughts, which are he's given context of the story to the events that are happening, but we're getting a very detailed view of how he sees himself, which is great because it's juxtaposed against the way that Johnny Appleseed sees him. So if the Einstein issue was grounded in emotion, this one's grounded in friendship in a lot of ways. So they're very similar. But that one also was basically the entire issue was set in a hospital room. There wasn't a lot for Brian Hitch to do visually to lean into the idea of this being fantastical fiction, for lack of a better term, historical fiction. Taking these, we know that Johnny Appleseed didn't actually have magic powers, right? He couldn't just throw apple seeds on the ground and giant apple trees wouldn't just sprout to the age, and size they would be after, decades and decades, if not centuries of growth. But what this does with the giant apple and the giant worm that you saw earlier that I showed, the whole idea was there was a worm in the apple when the apple was grown to a gigantic size, so the worm grew to a gigantic size as well. Doing things like that, giant worm, giant apple, this giant tree, like this to me, this splash page, which is just beautiful. You used the word atmosphere earlier, and this is Brian Hitch getting to establish the atmosphere of the story with the colors as well, how everything's sort of bright and golden. And yeah, this sort of sums up the feel and the tone of this story, of this issue, of all of the issues, of what Redcoat is as a series. This sums it up perfectly. So for me, the highlight of this particular issue is actually Brian Hitch's art. I think it's gorgeous. The story is still very strong, don't get me wrong. But man, I just love the art. I thought it was fantastic. Big fan of Redcoat. But I will say, and it's not because, this is American history. And for the record, we don't learn anything about Canadian history. Like, I know next to nothing about Canadian history. We're very isolationist when it comes to, I took world history when I was in high school. And even AP history when I was in high school, but that focuses on kind of big events that affect the world. You study World War I, World War II, Vietnam War, that sort of thing. So it's American, it's world history, but with an American, perspective, as opposed to just learning about the history of Canada or whatever. And I never took any history classes in high school, although history does interest me. But anyway. Johnny Appleseed, obviously larger than life character. When they talk about, he wandered all over planting apple trees. It's not really the case, like he was in Pennsylvania a lot, and he went down to like the Ohio Valley and what have you. But, the tall tale you hear, like he traveled the whole of the United States. At that time, you got to remember though, when he was around, like to travel that distance that he did on foot, that's a lot. That's a lot of traveling, whereas most people in that day and age didn't go more than 10 miles from their home. So to have somebody traveling 1,000 miles, it did seem like they had walked all over the world or what have you. So that's where those tall tales come in. And yeah, pretty interesting. Obviously, he was one of the first most well-known horticulturalists, like you said. And by all accounts, he was very, very giving, very generous man and what have you. So I think he's well represented here. And again, it's what this type of story allows itself to do, to kind of bring these American myths to life in a really fun way, and maybe introduce them to people that aren't that familiar with them. And I love that it's Brian Hitch that does this with Jeff Johns. Jeff Johns obviously being American, and Brian Hitch being English. And I mentioned it to him at New York Comic Con that was pretty interesting. And Brian basically intimated that it's led to some interesting. There are different perspectives between him and Jeff on American history and these American historical figures. Their different perspectives have led to interesting conversations, which to be a fly on the wall for those conversations would probably be pretty fun. So yeah, I mean, Ghost Machine continues to knock it out of the park with these titles. I don't know that Redcoat's ever been my favorite, but it's enjoyable every issue. I will say I'm ready to go back to kind of a longer story arc, though, like we had to kick off the series. Not that I don't enjoy these one-shots, because it's giving more perspective and context into who Johnny Appleseed is. These sort of one-and-dones. And it does offer a really easy jumping-on point for a lot of people. But I am ready for a longer form arc for Simon Pure. And that's just my personal preference. Excuse me. All right, up next, Dust to Dust, issue number 2. First issue absolutely blew me away. This is written by J.G. Jones and Phil Brom. Art by J.G. Jones, letters by Jackie Marzon. I got a chance to chat with J.G. Jones this week. Unfortunately, Phil was sick and couldn't join us. But it was great to get some perspective. Now, Phil actually grew up in Oklahoma. J.G. grew up in northern Louisiana, very rural part of Louisiana, so they sort of have very similar sensibilities when it comes to that. One of the things that JG and I talked about, and that blew me away in the first issue, was the authenticity in the dialogue, like the sayings and the cadence and just the vocabulary of how they talk here, and that was a lot of Phil, according to JG, growing up in that era and being from a very small town where a lot of those sayings, from back in the 1930s, here we are almost 100 years later, and people are still using the same expressions, which is really interesting. So we didn't get too spoilery in that conversation, get a little more spoilery here. Basically, what's going on is it's the Dust Bowl. We're in the town of New Hope, which is in the middle of the Dust Bowl in the Great Depression. And not only are there gathering dust storms, which obviously can kill and are super dangerous, you can suffocate because you literally can't breathe. You're breathing in dust. Also, it's kind of like sandblasting in a way. The winds are so powerful, and the dust acts as an abrasive, and it can literally like strip the flesh from your bones, like literally, and you're left skeletonized. So in addition to that danger, while these dust storms are happening, there's a serial killer. There's somebody out there killing people in this small town of New Hope. Why? Who it is? That's part of the mystery. But the thing that is so excellent, other than this gorgeous art that you're seeing from JG, and he talks about the decision to do it monochromatically with just spot color here or there to give it this real bleached out feel. But in addition to this, and the art, it's just so detailed and so amazing. The compositions for the body language to give that sense of despair, all the character in the face and the facial acting, emotion in the face is done really well also. But in addition to that, what's great about it is the fact that these characters, through their dialogue, like I was mentioning before, feel so fully realized. And part of that, JG talks about this in the interview, the fact that him and Phil have been working on this for so long, like over 10 years, gave them a chance to really live with these characters and flesh them out. But the fact that they feel real because it's not like the hero, the main character here, this Sheriff Meadows, is this perfect paragon of virtue, square-jawed hero, as JG put it. He's got his flaws, he's got his demons that he's wrestling with and whatever. So it feels very real to life. Like nobody is just one thing. Nobody's, a perfect person or a perfect hero or what have you. So in a lot of ways, it's a mysterious story. We don't know a lot about the past of Sheriff Lawton Meadows yet. We're kind of learning that as we go. The mystery of who the serial killer is. And at this point in the story, they're not even necessarily aware. Sheriff Meadows isn't even necessarily aware there's a serial killer. Just starting to get to the building blocks of that. But the first couple issues have been more about establishing who the characters are in the town of New Hope and kind of the status quo and the despair and what people are dealing with and what have you. So we saw in the first issue a family, the Olsen family, a father and a mother and their two children, of which the baby is sick, apparently has pneumonia, and then there's a little boy. They're pulling up stakes and they're leaving. So he's kind of a homesteader, right? So kind of like you work the land, you're a sharecropper, another word for it. You work the land, you grow the crops, you sell the crops, and then you give a percentage of the sale of the crops to the landowner because you don't own the land. And in exchange, you get to live on the land. You get to live on the house. But with the state of agriculture during that time, during the Dust Bowl, not able to raise any crops. Plus, there was a big drought. There was no water, so the soil was in terrible shape because they had farmed it and farmed it and farmed it for decades, and they didn't understand you can't just farm land and take all the nutrients and elements out of it by growing all these crops without replenishing. Then you end up with land that can't grow anything because there's no minerals and nutrients left. In addition to having pulled up all the water from the water table, and if there's no rain and you can't pull up groundwater, you have no water, you end up with a drought. The soil gets dried out. Then these wind storms come in, and that's how you end up with a dust storm, right? Because the soil has been so dried out and leached of its life, basically, that it becomes just this fine grit that's blown all over. As some of these dust storms carried dust from Oklahoma as far away as New York City. That's how big these dust storms were. So you can't imagine that this farmer's going to be able to raise any crops, and so he basically abandons his deal. And we see that in the first issue, and the landowner is very upset. I can't believe he would give up or whatever. Like, I don't know what the landowner expects to be able to do if the guy can't grow any crops. So they had left, and he was gonna he was going to try to sell his mule to his brother for gas money to try to get to California. California was in not as bad a shape. First of all, the land hadn't been farmed for as long because it took, a while for everybody to migrate out west. And eventually, when they first went out there, everybody was mining gold, 1849. That's where the term 49ers comes from. And then eventually a lot of people that settled there, couldn't find gold, but hey, we can grow crops. And they also weren't in drought. They were still receiving rain. So a lot of people from the Dust Bowl, from the Midwest, moved to California to become migrant farm workers, pick peaches, pick grapes, that sort of thing. So that's what this family of the Olsons are trying to do when they get caught in a dust storm. And that's what we see on the last page here. I mentioned the dust being so abrasive. You can see it here, how it literally ate away the tires of this their truck that they were trying to flee in. So whether or not they survived, this might be in issue 3 where we get the first idea of or chance to see the serial killer's work, where they're aware that there's a serial killer stalking people in New Hope under the cover of these dust storms. Again, why, who it is, remains a mystery. There's a real mysterious feel, and it's very much a slow burn, and the pacing's very deliberate. But I imagine the pacing's going to ramp up as we move forward here in the story, because it's only 8 issues. But it's just brilliantly done. The art is fantastic, and I had a great time chatting with JG. I've never met him in person. Look forward to getting to do that hopefully this year at San Diego. But the fact I had never had him on the show, he was definitely a bucket list guy for me to have come on and talk about the series. So again, highly recommended. First issue sold out, but the second issue, or second printing rather, of the first issue is going to be out on February 3rd. So you can pick up issue 2 this week, and then if you missed out on issue 1, you can get a second print on February 3rd if your shop doesn't still have copies of the first printing. Anyway, you read this as well, Rocky. What did you think?
Yeah, I think I would emphasize, I would just make very clear to people who are picking this up that this is definitely a slow burn. We're at the end of the second issue, and it's not entirely like we know that there's probably a killer out there, but there's still more to be revealed. It still feels like he's in the process of setting things up. The art is absolutely fantastic. The level of detail, I would very strongly encourage that if you read this comic right after reading a random issue of a superhero comic, you're likely just going to skim. Don't skim through the pages. Take your time, because the level of detail in each panel is incredible. And as J.G. Jones said in your interview, he meticulously researched the time period. He knows what he was drawing. There's a reason why he's drawn every single thing, right down from the shape of the glass to the whiskey that was drank, to the pictures on the wall, to the style of the furniture in the rooms on the items that are in the background of every single panel. It really is incredible. The story itself is a work in progress. Bear in mind, this is 8 issues, like you said, and but this is a slow burn, but it's a really enjoyable one. I will say that I already know this is going to read so much better as a trade because you won't have to wait. It's almost like one of those movies you don't want to. It's like Imagine stopping to watch a movie just when it starts to get ramped up. Well, that's how I feel reading this. The art is really to be appreciated. There are scenes here where Sheriff Lawton, he seems to be having a nightmare. He dreams. It almost looks like he's having a dream of a girl being picked up by like an alien on a 6-legged horse. I don't know if it's reminiscent of Armageddon or something. I'm not really sure why he's having that dream, but it's clearly something's going on here. It's something he's having very horrific dreams. How is that related to the serial killer? Not really sure. Sarah, the girl from the city, the photographer, the photojournalist, I guess from the city, from the big city there, doing the story. Just at a time when this small town has to deal with their serial killer, and there's even the doc that he rescues, he finds out that the bones he found are in fact human. And so, the seeds are being planted of the big revelation that this is a serial killer because he doesn't know yet. You alluded to the fate of the family and in the vehicle that will be revealed next issue. All this stuff is good stuff. It is a slow burn, but all to the betterment. Jay Jones' art makes you appreciate the story a little more. Good stuff.
Yeah, like I said, I think issue 3 things are going to start ramping up. So we'll see what happens then. All right, up next, we have another title from Ghost Machine. It's Hornsby and Halo. Storytellers credited as Peter J. Tomasi and Peter Snyberg. John Kalis on colors, Rob Lee on letters. Yeah, I know that you've been really enjoying this. I have as well. Interesting with the third issue here. First issue, sort of introduction. Second issue established that it's these two characters, one being an angel baby, one being a demon baby, sent to Earth. The angel being raised by a family that tends to be more evil. The demon baby by a more righteous or angelic, for lack of a better term, family. So it's like they're being raised in an environment that's antithetical to their nature. So it's the whole idea of nature versus nurture that's being explored here. So second issue really established that it's a bigger world with a lot more players in it than we might have necessarily thought due to the initial sort of elevator pitch of the series. And now things are starting to pick up in terms of action here with the two main characters becoming aware that each other has abilities. So, and perfect art for what feels a little bit like a story that could be aimed more at younger readers, but I don't think that's necessarily the case, because the ideas here, nature versus nurture, and the things that are being explored, you can get really deep in analyzing them, which would lend itself for a read of a more mature reader. But at the same time, this is very accessible for younger readers as well. So that's I think one of the real sort of features of this title, one of the real attributes, I think, that where you can recommend it to readers of all ages. Yeah, I'm really enjoying this. What do you think of this issue, Rocky?
I quite enjoyed it. Zachary Halo, his parents run a funeral home. They're kind of criminals. They rob the dead people, that they rob the bodies that they bury. Zachary Halo is a great kid, but he's abused he's taken advantage of by his parents. He had Rose Hornsby. Of her parents are much more are much better people, but in the previous issue, Zachary and Rose ended up having an altercation with each other, meeting up because of the Zachary prevented a robbery of some of the corpses at the graveyard in the previous issue. He ended up destroying, damaging the hearse that his father owns. He's punished for that. In the meantime, Zachary overhears his parents, talking to guys that they're minions that they hire to sort of basically fence off the stolen items that they steal from the dead. And meanwhile, Rose Hornsby, there's other machinations. There's other celestial beings that have a vested interest in destroying this peace that exists between heaven and hell, who exchange their offspring of Zachary Halo and Rose Hornsby in the different families. And so this very tenuous peace between heaven and hell is on the precipice of being destroyed, because the minions of hell want to overturn it, and they don't like this piece that they feel was sort of forced upon them. And it's really Peter Tomasi does a really good job sort of scripting how Zachary and Rose, they continue to have interactions with each other. They're not really friends, but you can tell they're going to become reluctant friends and reluctant allies, despite the fact that they represent two very, of course, black and white opposing forces. Very well done. Another interesting and well crafted new third chapter in this series.
Yeah, I mean, these are the formative years for these two characters. So that's part of what makes it so interesting. Like, who are they going to become? Which, again, gets back to the idea of nature versus nurture. All right, up next we have Seasons, issue number 1 from writer Rick Remender. Art is by Paul Azaceta. Let's see if... Go. Colors by Mateus Lopez, letters by Russ Wooten. I didn't have this credits page in the previous copy that I had that Rick Remender sent me, because I did have a chance to talk to Rick and Paul. Hope you guys all had a chance to check out that that interview. That interview with them dives so deep into what they're trying to do and kind of the aesthetics of this issue. So, and the series overall. So if you're curious about seasons, I would highly recommend you go listen to that interview. It does justice to this issue in this series in a much better way than Rocky and I can for what they're trying to establish. But the initial conceit is the fact that you have 4 seasons, if you will, and the reason we call them 4 seasons is because that's their last name. So you have spring, summer, autumn, and winter. Those are their names. So spring seasons, summer seasons, autumn seasons, winter seasons. And their parents are these world-renowned detectives that have gone missing and have been missing for years. And each of the girls, each of the season's girls is very distinct in their personality. And we get a look at sort of the town that they live in, and we get a look at who Spring is as she's delivering packages. She's kind of a mail carrier. And it establishes in sort of a fanciful way what the story is going to be like, the aesthetic of the story. But there's also this circus, if you will, that comes to town with a parade. And inherently, like a lot of people think, clowns are just the way they look, they're evil, blah, blah, blah. There's an aesthetic, there's a menace to the circus, and you wonder, what the circus has to do with their missing parents. What are the intentions of the circus? You can see this character here looks very menacing in a lot of ways, which is the same character that we see on the cover. So the sisters haven't been all together in quite a while, but a big part of the first part of the story is Spring chasing this letter. Like I said, she's a mail carrier. She actually ends up chasing a letter that's addressed to herself that her sister had sent her, that kind of is foreboding on what's going to happen to the story going forward. And you can see how much the colors change, which really helps change the mood, because it basically says, hey, you're in danger. It's a long story. I can't write it down here. But I'm being followed. I'm not safe. So please, you need to be safe. And it seems like we're going to get kind of the reunion of the sisters in an upcoming issue. And perhaps the sisters will go on a hunt or a journey to try to find their parents. So it's a very interesting aesthetic for the artwork, different than what I've ever seen from Paul Azaceta before, and a really intriguing start from Remender. So again, I really encourage everybody, if any of this sounds even remotely interesting to you, go listen to that interview, because they talk a lot about their inspirations and what they're trying to do, both visually and narratively. And yeah, I'm really intrigued. This isn't like, just based on the style of the art, this isn't something that I normally would be attracted to, but having discussed it with those two creators, and so many of the things that they pointed out in that first third of the story or whatever it is, with Spring chasing that letter, which was so interesting and such an interesting narrative device to introduce us to various characters in the town as she's chasing it through, like a butcher shop and down the street and whatever. I could really kind of see it in an animated style, and the guys talked about that as well. So anyway, what was your thought on this one, Rocky?
Well, I'm going to quote from Rick Remender himself in his comments in the back of the book. He says, "By taking our time to live in the chase, as Spring is I guess as Spring is delivering packages and chasing her letter through the town, we show the readers her world, and then we experience it in a single fluid sequence as opposed to telling any of it." And he's absolutely right about that. This issue, the bulk of this issue, is just Spring chasing a letter. And you do get many aspects of the town, and it's like Dust to Dust. You're going to get more of an appreciation out of this if if you look at this from an artistic point of view, and that was absolutely intentional by Rick Remender. Now, for fans of Rick Remender, we know that he's tremendously talented. He has told many different types of stories. So he's well adept at telling plot-centric stories versus any. That might more rely upon the art or more rely upon the dialogue. He's done it all, and I would just tell people that if you're used to a particular kind of Rick Remender story, I mean, this was by design, because as you said, you even acknowledged that maybe this wasn't not normally a comic you'd be drawn to. I have to admit, at first I'm sort of like skimming through it. And I got to admit, it wasn't until I read the back and I realized this was all intentional that I went back and took the time to actually appreciate each page and look at it, because that's what we should do. And sometimes I make the mistake because I read too damn many comics. Sometimes I get a little impatient. But I will admit that this is a comic. It is enjoyable to just take your time. Look at the beautiful art. You do get a sense of the character. We really just sort of meet, two of the sisters. So we're just getting to know these two of the sisters really in this issue, but the central idea is laid. I absolutely intend on giving this a second chance. I got to be honest, because it's Rick. If it was anyone else other than Rick Remender, I'd be maybe just a little bit reluctant to pick up subsequent issues. But in Rick Remender, I trust. He's more than earned my trust. And he's even talked about his experience and him always wanting to write a story like this. And so, yeah, I'm going to give him that opportunity to impress me further in subsequent issues.
Yeah, again, I go back. Just when we see, I'm scrolling through, I showed this double-page splash, and we talked about it when I talked to Rick and Paul. And just how brightly colored it is and how amazing. And then just a few short pages later, when we finally get Spring reading the letter from her sister Autumn, just that stark change in coloring. And it's also, a bit of a flashback. So, go to almost into these sepia tones, because obviously we see her writing the letter as Spring is reading it. But like that change in aesthetic is just so brilliantly done. And kind of the fanciful chase of the letter that we get for Spring, juxtaposed against this more serious look on her sister's face and these somber colors and what have you, that go along with her reading the letter and the sense of danger and what have you. Just, again, brilliantly done. Really curious to see where the story is going to go from here. So we shall see. All right. Up next, from Mad Cave, this is Kill Train, second issue of Kill Train, which is, it is the first issue. This is, this is a preview for this. I was like, God, did I miss the first issue? Because this definitely seemed like an introduction. Yeah, this is the first issue. I'm scrolled all the way back to the end is the problem. This is what the second issue cover looks like, which is amazing. So let me get to the cover of issue 1. There we go. So this is a really interesting, if not sort of depressing, I don't know if that's the word, concept from Olivia Quatoro Briggs, who's been on the show before and is a super talented writer. The art is by Martina Niosi, and it's very bloody at times, but very well done. Colors by Simone D'Angelo, letters by Becca Carey. So the concept here is sometime in the near future, New York has an overpopulation problem. The whole world has an overpopulation problem, but New York specifically. And it starts off here and we see, some really gory scenes with all these dead bodies on a subway train and what have you. So as we're reading the story, what becomes revealed is that, again, this is just really bleak, but the powers that be have decided that in order to solve the population problem of New York, that certain people on subway trains are going to be killed. Everybody on that particular train that gets designated as a kill train is killed. And it's random. So if you ride the subway, you're taking the chance. Supposedly it's like one train out of every 100 on any given day. All the people will be killed. And supposedly, according to the news reports, they're getting close to being able to end the program because they've killed enough people to solve the overpopulation problem. So originally it was supposed to be like you were on this train and gas got pumped in, and you like went to sleep, and it was supposed to be peaceful and whatever. We see that's not the case. So first of all, the people that were working in the program that were assigned to like clean up the bodies and whatever, make sure everything went as it was supposed to, they all and this is revealed by this former person that was on that detail that quit basically, and is saying that's not the case. It's violent. It's bloody. Everybody that was kind of part of this program that agreed to do it saw how horrific it was, and they all quit. So they didn't want to stop the program. The powers that be didn't want to stop the program. So they went and recruited all these like mentally unstable, like psychiatric patients and murderers or whatever. And so now they're the ones that go on the kill train, and they're like literally murdering people, cutting their heads off, just like a scene out of The Purge, if you will. There are some similarities with the idea of The Purge here. And so we're following this woman who her life hasn't gone the way that she thought it would, and she's recently moved in to an apartment with her fiance, and she's a writer. She's a freelance writer, and she thought that she had a book deal. She submitted a spec script, and the publisher asked her to make all these changes. She made all the changes, sent it back, and then they rejected it ultimately anyway. So she did all this work for nothing, and she's kind of broke, and she doesn't have money, but she does have a daughter from a previous relationship. So she takes her daughter to school, and then she needs to go meet with somebody about some work. But she doesn't have any money, and she thought she had a taxi pass, but she inadvertently left it on the seat of the last taxi that she took. And so she ends up having to take the kill train or take the subway, right? Which, if at all if you can avoid taking the subway, if you can take an Uber, if you can afford a taxi, if you're just going to walk, there's no chance, because it's only a 1 in 100 chance that you're going to end up on one of these kill trains. But it's still a chance. But there are people that just can't afford to get around any other way, and so they do still take the subway. Now, if it were me, I'd be walking. I'm just walking, whatever. I'm walking. I'm not taking the chance. Yeah. Why would you, whatever? But again, they're New Yorkers, and maybe they have a certain idea, and probably skews more toward younger. Younger people tend to be less cautious. Certainly, if I was in my younger days, I'd be like, whatever, that's not going to happen to me. You think you're going to live forever? So anyway, she ends up on this train, and now and it's more crowded than usual, because she does meet up randomly with an old girlfriend from college, who always takes the subway, and she's this girl Vanessa. She doesn't typically take the subway, but the woman she meets up with, Corin, does, and so Corin's kind of giving her lay of the land, saying, yeah, there was just a kill train yesterday. Based on how often they do it, it's very unlikely that there's going to be another kill train today, which is always why it's most crowded on the subway the day after, because you feel like your odds are, much lower of being on the kill train. But of course, as you probably can predict, they get on the train, and sure enough, people start getting their heads chopped off. We see this crazy character here, and Vanessa says, I'm on a fucking kill train. So really bleak idea, but an interesting idea. Again, that cover for issue 2 just looks amazing. Vanessa seems a little scatterbrained and not necessarily somebody I would describe as capable. She feels like her life is spiraling out of control. She doesn't have any money. She hasn't been successful in her career. Feels like she'd be further along in her life now. She has a teenage daughter. Like, doesn't feel like she's accomplished anything in her life. So again, there's a sense that Olivia Cotoro Briggs, the writer, gives us here of Vanessa sort of being a failure in a lot of ways. So is she going to find some new agency? Does she have some ability, fighting ability or something that we don't know about? Again, I keep going back to this she looks pretty badass there in the cover of issue 2. I keep going back to it.
Well, those single mother with kids, they're badass when you piss them off. I tell you what.
That's true, especially if their kids are there being threatened, but her daughter's at school. So yeah, very curious to see where this goes. I didn't know anything about this when I went into reading it, other than it was written by Olivia, who again is somebody that I've had on the show I think a couple times, and really talented. So that was why I gave it a read, and I'm glad I did because I really enjoyed it. So I don't know. Did you get a chance to read it, Rocky? Anything to add?
Not much. I just I made the political reference that it's like it's what happens if Trump becomes mayor of New York City.
Yeah.
And just and I won't say anything else. But no, I want to read this in more detail. I've just been enjoying your review. I haven't read it, but I certainly the visuals are appealing. I like it. Looks violent as hell. I love the cover too. The cover just pulls me right in. So yeah, there's nothing like a kick-ass. There's something sexy about a woman with a bat covered in blood. Come on, what's not to like?
All right, up next, a book that you read that I haven't. It's Sam and Twitch. We're up to issue number 10, written by Todd McFarlane, along with Jordan Barrell handling the script. Art is by Thomas Nachlik. Special thanks to Magnus Arts. Colors by FCO Placencia, with flats by Sheila Saldana, and letters by longtime Spawn Universe letterer Tom Orzechowski. So give us your thoughts on this one.
Well, this is actually part two of this of a story that involves Sam and Twitch. Sam and Twitch are detectives, and Twitch is an expert marksman. And Twitch ended up shooting a suspect, and he never misses. But in this case, he ended up apparently killing a suspect, shooting him through the eye last issue. Internal Affairs got involved, did an investigation, and he's feeling terrible. And Sam, his partner, he's got a sort of a dysfunctional relationship with his partner, but they're both a pretty good detective team. But what has transpired is that it's something mysterious has happened. It's the forensics on the person who Twitch shot apparently reveals that his body was literally riddled with drugs, and his body was overdosed with drugs such that he was technically dead 2 or 3 hours before he was shot by Twitch, which doesn't make any sense. How can that possibly be? Because he was up and running around, and how could Twitch have killed him if he was technically already dead? He had that many drugs in his system. That doesn't make a lot of sense. The sort of the mystical nature mystery sort of continues in this issue. What writer Jordan Barrell and Todd McFarlane do so well here is, it's Twitch's relationship with his wife. He's got a wife who cares for him, who supports him. He's got a decent relationship with his kid, there's something really odd going on here because his kid's getting harassed at school because there's rumor going around that his dad have killed somebody, and so that causes tension. But it's good to see a mother. It's good to see actually a functional marriage here for Twitch, even though he looks like a goofy guy with glasses. But he's extremely competent, and he's got a partner who cares for him. Even though Sam is kind of a jerk, sort of a rugged exterior type of detective, he knows that Twitch is innocent, and he works with the forensic, and he's putting the case together for Internal Affairs to basically prove his partner is innocent, and he puts together a pretty good case. Twitch is so by the book, he won't even let Sam tell him anything because he doesn't want to interfere or taint the investigation. And meanwhile, there's other things that are going on here. There seems to be a person that's confronting Twitch and ostensibly driving a vehicle that seems to look the same as a Hot Wheels car that his son has. So something clearly mystical or magical or something's going on here. Not really sure what it is. But the bottom line is it as they're trying to figure all this out, it once again, it pulls you into the story, and it ends with Twitch being assaulted and basically left potentially. He's he's assaulted in an alley, and he looks like somebody robs or plants a gun on him. So they're probably trying to set him up to make. I'm guessing maybe that he's going to be set him up to look like a police shooting of some kind, but. The mystery builds, and so I'm really intrigued. This is I mean, one of the things that really works for it is the art. I want to give full props to the Jordan, the Thomas Notchlick, special thanks to Magnus Arts. The art is really excellent. Colors by Placencia and Saldana. This really good. It sets the tone. It sets the mood. You can tell it's in the Spawn universe. And yeah, this really works. I'm really intrigued to see where this is going. And I've never, like I said, I feel like even though I've been familiar with Sam and Twitch a little in the past, I've never really gotten too much into it. But I'm glad I have. The second issue is quite good, and I'm really curious to see how this is going to move forward.
Yeah, what's really interesting. What's really interesting about it is like how much it is focused on Sam and Twitch. Like, I haven't read all the Sam and Twitch stories, obviously. I've read a lot of them where they're guest stars or supporting characters in the Spawn comic itself. So it makes sense that the cases they're working on tend to be supernatural in nature. And then some of the other Sam and Twitch stuff that I've read, it definitely leans into the idea of serial killers and what have you, where they feel a little bit supernatural, which makes it feel like it's appropriate for the Spawn universe. This doesn't see, again, I'm not caught up on Sam and Twitch, but one thing that strikes me whenever you talk about these issues is how grounded these stories feel, as much as they still belong in the Spawn universe. So that's an interesting and challenging balance to have. And yeah, all credit to everybody involved for making that happen. It's really interesting. All right, up next from Mad Cave, we have Exit City number 3. This is from writer Mark London, the late Carl Mostert on art, David Barron on colors, Dave Sharp on letters. So we have these two detectives in Exit City. Exit City is sort of this independent country, if you will, that's the city-sized, that's out in the ocean. And they've been, these two detectives, Miller and McCormick, have been trying to solve this mystery. So McCormick, very much an honest cop by the book, but has his eccentricities. Supposedly has these three entities, if you will. Supposedly he was part of some like special forces type team, Black Ops team, where there was 4 of them. They were ambushed. He was the only one that survived. But sort of the memories and the intellect of his 3 team members are encapsulated in these 3 vials he carries around in his coat pocket. And he bounces ideas off them and talks to them. Supposedly they talk back and give him their insights into crime scenes and cases he's trying to solve and what have you. But everybody just thinks that McCormick is sort of nuts because he's always talking to his coat pocket, because all that stuff's sort of top secret, right? Now Miller, for her part, she's a cop that bends the rules nearly to breaking, and sometimes does break the law or do things that are illegal, but all in the service of justice. So they're sort of diametrically opposed, different ends of the spectrum here of how to solve cases and put away the bad guys. But ultimately they have the same goal, which is, to solve the case, to catch the bad guys and what have you. So we saw in the first couple issues, some people have been killed, and they're looking for a connection between them and trying to figure out what's going on. And we saw at the end of last issue, McCormick get kidnapped. So Miller's trying to track down McCormick. We see McCormick here kidnapped, and we find out something really interesting. Now, this is a great series. I recommend it. If you have any intention of picking it up and reading it, you probably want to be sure you read issue 3 before you listen to the rest of this review. Because what happens here is going to be a huge spoiler. We find out that McCormick never had a team. McCormick was, he was part of this special ops program, but basically his brain was experimented on to allow him to process different information, data, crime scenes, mission parameters for whatever mission he was given in multiple ways. So his brain, in a way, is sort of split up into 4 sort of distinct personalities or different perspectives that can process the same information in 4 different ways. The way he himself would process it, and then 3 additional. So he never had a team. And he really was just talking to some vials of paint in his pocket. And it's sort of like memories planted, if you will. So, he goes through kind of this crisis here as he's in this room where he's captured. Like, am I crazy, for talking to myself and what have you? But as he's sort of figuring this out, he realizes what was done to him. His memories start coming back. And in the meantime, Miller is using security camera footage and following his footsteps to find out, where he is and to go and rescue him. But due to the knowledge and the ability that McCormick has, and his realization that, hey, I have this ability. It wasn't these vials in my pocket that allowed me to sort of look at different problems from a different perspective and solve them. Like, it's all within himself. And so, based on the fact that he has that knowledge now, it seems like he's going to be able to escape on his own, but we'll have to see. So I thought this was just brilliantly done. Not at all what I expected. And, other things are revealed as well about who might be behind this and their reasons for that and what have you. And it goes to the highest levels of the government of Exit City. And I'm sure that'll play out in the next issue. So, the art by Carl Mostert is really fantastic. Again, it's such a loss for him to have passed away in his early 40s, at such a young age. But yeah, I've been enjoying Exit City. It's probably been my favorite of these Underworld titles. But this issue just took it up to the next level. And I cannot wait to see what happens next, or to see what the role that Miller and McCormick are going to have in the... I think it's called like Midnight or something like that. The crossover between these 3 Underworld titles that's coming this summer for Mad Cave. Yeah. So just fantastic. Love the issue.
Yeah, I did. I read it as we were reviewing some of the previous comics. I was reading this one, and it flows really nicely. And the scenes going back and forth between Miller and McCormick, and how basically in the previous 2 issues they kind of had a dysfunctional sort of like they were sort of feeling each other out. And they had mixed feelings about each other's character and how because they had very different approaches to crime fighting. And it's really cool here how they both end up in the final 2 pages. They both end up with realizing that they're both bound and determined to help each other, and especially with Miller saying, "Hold on, you crazy SOB." She's going to be going into the corporate building to rescue McCormick, and McCormick's going to find a way to break out to help to save her. So even though they don't necessarily, they're not the best of friends, you can tell that they respect each other in a way, and that's exactly what you want for the buddy sort of bad cop good cop sort of flick, and that's sort of what this is. And the Moss art, as you said, is truly fantastic. It's tragic what happened to him.
Yeah, and another one I think that's going to read fantastically in a collected edition. So I don't know if it goes beyond 4 issues. I think all these Underworld titles are slated for 4, but and then kind of lean into the crossover. But I definitely hope we get more. Like, I want to see Miller and McCormick on more cases beyond just the crossover with Hour of the Wolf and Revolution 9. Yeah. Okay, let me get the graphics up. For the next title we're going to talk about, it's Red Before Black, on the last page again. For some apologies, everybody. All right, written by Stephanie Phillips, illustrated by Goran Sudzuka, colors by Eve Zvoracina, and lettered by Tom Napolitano. We've really been enjoying this. It's been a wild ride. Give us your thoughts on this 4th issue, Rocky.
Well, this 4th issue continues the sort of the very much the misadventures between 2 people, very different, Leo and Val, and I full props to writer Stephanie Phillips, Goran Sudzuka on the art. I mean, the art's truly fantastic. That's what really stands out from. I just love this particular style of art, and this almost it seems odd to try to explain this because there's so much that's happened in by the time we hit this fourth issue. I had to go back and read the first two issues because I'd read the third last time, and I'd skipped it, and so I've come across this sort of almost haphazardly and by accident. But basically, Leo is I mean, it starts off with them literally talking to a sort of like a they need help from this dinosaur trainer. Meanwhile, their dinosaur trainer, this crocodile, it's almost like a Crocodile Dundee type character, and they're on the run from the FBI. They ended up accidentally killing someone in a previous issue. The arm is found by the cops that are looking for them. They have to figure out what the hell they want to do. Meanwhile, there's I don't know how to. I'm still a little bit trying to find my way with. She's got these. I'm not sure what these. It's red before black. I'm not really sure exactly what the nature of Val's powers are exactly, or what she's manifesting. Maybe you could help me out with that. But we learn more about Leo's past here. About she was molested as a young child, and she was, and that sort of maybe explains some of her awkward sort of craziness, borderline psychosis that we've experienced since the first issue. The reluctant friendship. Leo wants to leave Val. She says basically because, technically she's the one that killed the person. She wants to leave him, and all of the machinations of what has happened in the previous issue catches up to both of them as they're attacked at the end of the issue, and it sort of ends on a cliffhanger. This is what Stephanie Williams has done very well, is that both these women have very checkered and dysfunctional pasts that for both of them is coming back to haunt them in ways that, frankly, they're unaware of the background of each other, and both their pasts have coming back to haunt them essentially at the same time at the culmination of this issue. And that's what makes it work so well. And we got a seeming betrayal as well. This is one of those ones where I'm going to look forward to going back and rereading it from beginning to end. But it's like I said, this is another one of these reluctant, they're not really friends, but damn, they really seem to be able to save each other's lives and help each other out, despite the fact that one of them doesn't really want to be friends with the other one, but damn, she just can't help herself to care. And it's just, Stephanie Phillips does a really good job on the characterizations here, and especially establishing the backgrounds of these characters, getting us to care for psychotic women. I guess that's a gift. But this is kind of what I wish. I almost feel like the way that she scripts Leo, I wish that she would. I get. This is a more interesting character than Harley Quinn in her run on Harley Quinn. so I kind of like that. She's really coming into her own. Stephanie Phillips is at this point, she's a seasoned writer, but this is one where I think this is my favorite. I said before, this is my favorite series that she's written so far. I enjoyed this even more than her series Grimm, which is kind of hit and miss with me. But this one is really, every issue I've read, and this one on issue 4, I've quite enjoyed, even though I admit to being a little bit lost on some of the plot elements. I suspect that's on me. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll come together in the end. And yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, this characterization of Leo could definitely work for Harley with an edge. But I don't imagine that DC would ever let that happen, because it's, they try to keep Harley more accessible for all ages. But yeah, use the word misadventure. That's very much the case. These two women who, like you mentioned, have checkered past and have a lot of baggage in their past, are reluctantly thrown together by circumstance. And in a lot of ways, they're victims of circumstance, victims of the choices they made. I mean, when Leo was in prison, the only reason she's out is because the FBI recruited her to try to infiltrate the gang that one of her former Army colleagues is in charge of, and that's who we see on the final couple pages here, that threatening Val, because he's tracked them down. He knows that that Leo's the one that betrayed him. So yeah, I mean, as much as these women have had a lot of circumstances and events go against them that have thrown them together, you gotta admire their loyalty to each other. I mean, they sort of don't know each other that well. They don't really owe each other anything. But, there's a line in here about them being kindred spirits. So, I think the reason that they work together so well as partners and are willing to sort of go on a limb for each other is because they do see a lot of themselves in each other. Leo sees a lot of herself in Val, and Val sees a lot of herself in Leo. And so in a way, when they're going out on a limb to save the other person, their reluctant partner, if you will, in a way they're saving themselves. And so I think that's the reason that it works. But there's a zaniness to the story, again, like that would really work, like almost and this is a completely different aesthetic, but it's the one thing that comes to mind when you talk about two people reluctantly thrown together, where all these crazy events keep happening to them. And from that perspective, just that part of the story, it reminds me of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles in a lot of ways, right? Steve Martin and John Candy, classic, movie where these two guys just can't catch a break. They're just trying to get home for Thanksgiving, and all these crazy stuff keeps happening to them. That's sort of Val and Leo here. Like they're just trying to do what they're supposed to do to accomplish their goal. In Val's case, to get enough money to survive, because she's had a rough ride, and that's why she tries to steal the drugs and break up a drug deal at the very beginning, because she worked for I can't remember his name, but she worked for the same guy that Leo is out to try to infiltrate, and he sort of dismissed her and didn't treat her well, and so they see a lot of themselves in each other. And so if Val can do that, if she could break up that drug deal and steal the drugs and sell them for herself, then she could have some financial freedom and the ability to kind of call her shots on her own and have some independence that she's never had before in her life. And for Leo, her goal is to do what the FBI wants her to do, to get the evidence she needs to basically turn over to the FBI, as much as she doesn't want to. Turn over, her old army buddy to the FBI and prove that he's running this criminal organization. That's what she needs to do to get herself out of prison, and that's her goal. So they're trying to accomplish this, but all this stuff just keeps getting in the way. And sometimes it's themselves. Sometimes it's themselves getting in each other's way. But again, this is a story I imagine it'll come together in the end for everything to make sense, and probably another one. It sound like a broken record here. It's going to read better in one sitting. Whether that's all reading all the individual issues or the trade or what have you. But yeah, just based on kind of the twists and turns and plot, we'll see how that all comes together. Now, as far as Leo's powers, it's still a total mystery. She, and even Val, she's trying to explain it to her, to Scooter Hunter here, or whatever his name is, the crocodile wrangler or wrestler or what have you, who I love how he's described, but he shows up because his little description here is the exact same way that Val describes him every time he comes up. Leo's father's first wife's son from another marriage, and he likes alligators. So basically, it's basically Leo's half, our stepbrother, I guess you'd say, who ends up apparently betraying them in the end. But yeah, how this is all going to shake out remains to be seen. But going back to this idea of Leo's power, she doesn't understand them. Val doesn't understand them. And even when she mentions them to Scott, she manifests this jungle or whatever. And in fact, Leo manifesting that jungle and Val being able to see it is kind of the first clue that Leo has that it's not just all in her mind. She's not just going crazy. So where those powers come from, what they mean, can she control them? Yeah, that's still a mystery. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out as well. But to your point, the Goran Suzuka art is perfectly suited for the book. This is a ton of fun. Stephanie is somebody who, like, the first time I had her on, it was for some independent work that she was doing at Aftershock, her first 2 series over there. I was just a fan of her right from the start. I thought she's a fantastic storyteller. And then, doing the stuff over at DC, which, for the most part, I enjoyed. Now she's got books over at Marvel. She's writing a Phoenix series right now. But has always had independent stuff coming out as well, whether that be Red Before Black or Artemis and the Assassin. I'm trying to think of the one, the Grimm that you mentioned over at Boom. Yeah, she's just fantastically talented, has great storytelling sensibilities. So, yeah, definitely recommend Red Before Black. And if you pick up all 4 issues now, you're going to get a big chunk of story. It'll be a lot easier to understand what's going on. But if you dip in here or there, apparently you've been doing, Rocky, yeah, you can imagine, like, watching 5 minutes here or there from, like, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, you'd feel lost as well. Because so much is constantly happening, right? They're in this city traveling by bus, and then they're over here traveling by car, and then they're over here on a plane, and yeah, it jumps around. There's a lot happening. There's a lot happening in this book as well. So, all right, last book we're going to talk about in detail. Another Mad Cave title, String, written by Paul Tobin. We have art by Carlos Javier Oliveras, Sarah Colella on colors, Taylor Esposito on letters. We had Paul on to talk about this book. It's fascinating. The main character here, she can see strings that connect people in 2 different ways. If there's a black string that connects 2 people, it means one person on one end of the string is the victim, and on the other end of the string is the murderer, the person that kills that victim. Or she sees blue strings. Blue strings connect people who have slept together, who have been intimate to each other. And she uses these abilities to help the police solve crimes. But they don't all. She's not somebody who's like a welcome person in a lot of circles, right? Because of the nature of the strings. I don't think that. I mean, the police are very interested in the black strings that she sees because it can help solve murders. It can also prevent future murders, which brings in a whole nother conundrum, which we've talked about before, which this idea of if you see a black string, it means somebody's going to kill somebody else. Do they actually have to kill somebody for that black string to appear? You would think so, right? Otherwise, technically, they haven't murdered them. Maybe they just have the intention of murdering them. But if they don't actually murder the person, can they be held responsible for murder? Right? It's like Minority Report with Tom Cruise, right? Where they were accusing these people of future crimes and putting them in cryogenic stasis for ever, taking away their freedom when they actually hadn't killed anybody. So interesting. But the reason that this woman is Yoon is not really welcome. She's sort of persona non grata, which means not welcome, a person that's not welcome in Latin. But the reason that she is that is because it's the other aspect of it, the other strings that she sees. She can look at you and tell if you've slept with somebody else that's in this, same vicinity that's close enough to have that string. People don't necessarily like having the details of their sex lives, out there for others to see. So it's interesting. I mean, the very first issue, and Paul Tobin and I talked about this when he was on the show. Very first issue, she gets to the police precinct, and the only cop that stays there is the one that she hasn't met before, Luke, who's actually helping her. Because at the end of the first issue, Yoon sees a black string emanating from herself. So that means she's either going to be killed or or she's going to kill somebody. But yeah, the rest of the sort of bullpen at the police station sort of empties out because nobody wants to be around her because they don't want her to see their blue strings, which is just it's funny, it's humorous, it's also a little sad and depressing in a way, but it also feels like, yeah, that's exactly what would happen. The majority of people would be very uncomfortable around you. I sort of think, and maybe it's because I've been in a relationship with just one person for a long time, and so it wouldn't really bother me. I'm like, whatever. I think for older people who are married or what have you, you'd be like, yeah, I sleep with my wife. No big surprise there. But could you imagine Yoon like walking into like a club, filled with a bunch of 20 somethings, and be like, hey, this woman can see the strings of all the people that you've slept with. Yeah, that place would empty out in a heartbeat. For most people, there would be probably a subsection of young guys who would be like, hey, check out how many strings I have. Because that's just the way guys are. But anyway, there is a real sense of sort of truthfulness, if you will, in this book. as far as the action and the art, they're top notch. It's a lot of fun. The mystery aspect, the relationship that Yoon has with Luke, kind of this burgeoning friendship that seems really interesting as Yoon is trying to solve the mystery of where this black string goes. Is she going to be the victim? Is she going to be the murderer? Who is she connected to? And while she's doing this and Luke is helping her, she keeps stumbling along across other crimes that Luke is solving, and she is helping Luke solve. So in a way, he's getting a lot of cred here by helping her out, which is pretty interesting as well. But I just love this concept. It's fun. It's interesting. And the art is executed really, really well. It's paced really, really well. Pretty fast-paced for the most part, with intriguing supporting characters, not just Luke. But as Yoon was first trying to, solve this mystery, she was going back and talking to a lot of her other clients. She's working currently on a case for kind of the head of one of the crime families in the city, because his brother was, or a young cousin or somebody was killed. So trying to figure out who did that, which takes her into very dangerous places. She's also been hired by a porn actress, Liddy, who wants to find out who killed her dog. And so, yeah, these supporting characters are very colorful as well, and they add a lot to the story. So, yeah, definitely one of the better independent titles that is coming out right now in terms of just fun. Don't need to have knowledge of anything else. Kind of stands on its own. And yeah, just a heck of a lot of fun. Doesn't take itself too seriously. Gorgeous art, really well paced, and the dialogue, the scripting is a lot of puns and maybe not puns is the wrong word, but a lot of humor and kind of the one-liners, if you will, and jokes that Yoon is making at the expense of Luke and vice versa. So yeah, I'm really enjoying this. I feel like it gets better with every issue. So what are your thoughts on it, Rocky?
I really like Carlos Oliveira's art. In fact, I think the art's even improved from the first issue. It keeps getting better. I really love the art. I love that the mystery continues. The issue starts off with an attempt being made, presumably on Yoon's life, stopped by Luke. We get Liddy Mondo, the porn star. It is it's interesting how Yoon pretends to use her powers and to see black strings, but actually bluffs Liddy's manager Tommy Redder into basically confessing that he killed her dog, which is funny. I mean, it's done through the dialogue is funny. It's very quick-witted. You can see the growing friendship between Luke and Yoon, and Liddy is an interesting character. And I got it. Oliver's art, the facial expressions. There's a page where the manager Tommy Redder is his facial expression, and gets all contorted, and you can tell he doesn't want to. He gets so frustrated because he literally gets tricked into confessing to what he did to the dog, because he wanted her to do more porn movies, not spending so much time with her dog. And anyways, it's actually comical, very well done, very good he's very good. Oliveris is really good at showing scenes of violence. The lettering is excellent, because there's definitely some vulgarity here. The backgrounds are incredible. Just very, very well done. We learn more about the background from Yoon, more of her frustrations in dealing with her powers in the past, and then the issue ends with her going into a bar. She's called by Enzo Quinones, who is a gangster looking to who killed his nephew. You talked before about you spoke to Paul Tobin, the writer, about imagine going into a bar and what you would see if you could see all the sexual connections with blue strings between people. My God, well, that's exactly what's going to be happening in issue 4. That's what's teased, because at the end of this issue, she walks into a bar, and it's the cover of issue 4 that's teased, where she's actually right in the middle of a bar and there's blue strings everywhere. So I'm really looking forward to the 4th issue. Even I'm sure it's going to be just as enjoyable as this one was.
Yeah, a couple of black strings as well, which, you're in a gang bar. Yeah. I would expect there to be more black strings than blue strings.
That's right.
But
that's true.
I guess if there's girl members of the gang as well. Because on the last page where we see her in the bar, it looks like it's pretty much all guys. But then when we look at this other cover of the next issue, it looks like there's some women there as well. So yeah, you would expect there to be a lot of. You can only imagine the chaos that can ensue. I mean, these aren't people that are gonna take kindly to finding out that somebody they're sleeping with has previously slept with somebody else or is currently sleeping with somebody else. So yeah, the shit could definitely hit the fan. So we'll have to see how that plays out in the long. All right. Well, moment of truth. Well, actually, hold on. Before we do our books of the week, we probably should talk about some of the other titles that are coming out this week. Typically like to do that. All right, let me just back to page here. Yep. So let me go over some of the other books that are out this week that you might want to be on lookout for as far as indie titles, because they're like I said, it was a pretty big week for indie books. And before I do that, I just have to do a little mini rant here. I'll try to keep it short. But I think in our DC Spotlight we talked a little bit, or was it this one? I can't remember now because we recorded them back to back. But anyway, we're talking about the distribution issues that are going on, and that kind of dovetails in with some of the challenges of the industry right now. And variant covers, I think, are. I don't think they're a symptom. I think they're actually a cause of what is going on. Some people could look at them as a symptom. Hey, sales are down, so in order to prop them up, these idea of variant covers has come around and putting out all these different covers, and people are buying them and whatever. And it's sort of like, they can't help themselves. I've been a part of the problem at times buying variant covers. I've tried to cut back. I know Rocky tries not to buy variant covers either. But the problem is, it was sort of a trick to help, but now it's almost like the snake eating itself. It's become so necessary in the mind of a lot of publishers that it's become the problem itself. And the reason this comes up for me this week is because I want to point out how many books that Dynamite has coming out this week. So they have 4 new titles. They only have 4 new books this week, and then they have a couple of books that are basically books that came out previously, but they have a special cover of that book that's coming that wasn't available previously, that's coming out this week as well. So 6 individual books, with 2 of them that have had previous versions of them out before, but we'll give them the benefit of the doubt and not say 4 brand new books. We'll say 6. We'll say 6 distinct books from Dynamite that are coming out this week. Now, Rocky, I want you to guess how many. If we say, okay, let's count each cover that Dynamite is putting out as separate. Yeah. How many books do you think Dynamite has coming out this week?
Well, I do collect them I do collect about maybe 4 or 5 Dynamite titles, so I'm aware that they always have at least 5 or 6 variant covers. So I mean, I would say probably maybe 5, 6 times 5, 30 different covers.
118 books from Dynamite. This is why I don't buy Dynamite books. And from the bottom of my heart, Dynamite, fuck you. This is ridiculous. 118 covers. You are cannibalizing the industry. You are a huge part of the problem. This is not okay. It's why I pretty much don't cover Dynamite books. And like I said, I don't read them as much as I would like to. I'm not trying to hurt the creators that are over there. I would love to support some of those creators. I'm a fan of things like James Bond and Terminator, but I just, in good conscience, can't support them. And this is the only way I can choose not to support them, is by calling them out when they do bullshit like this, and by not covering their books. Like Silverhawks, is a cartoon I watched as a kid. I was a little older, so it didn't really land for me, as opposed to like Thundercats, which is also over at Dynamite, which I would like to be reading. Yeah. But
Yeah.
Silverhawks, came out later. But anyway, there's a #1 issue of Silverhawks that's out this week that has over 60 covers. So that's
Wow.
the majority. And it's #1, and so you can kind of understand why there would be a lot. But still, 60 covers is excessive. When it
That's
comes
ridiculous.
to Thundercats, we're on issue 12. So it's not like it's, some anniversary issue or whatever. It's just issue 12, and it has 30 covers. That's like this. It's out of hand. This is not okay to put out this many. It's not necessary. It's not okay. You're taking a small readership base and you're bleeding them dry. And a lot of these covers are ratio covers, so you're trying to lean into the whole speculator market or whatever. Like, this is the type of stuff that was being done, not necessarily as much with variants, but more with like gimmick covers, foils, and die cut covers and whatever. This is the sort of stuff that was happening before the big crash in the 90s, when the bottom fell out of the market. When you had all these people that had made money or were speculating in the sports card market, the bottom fell out of that, and so they moved over to comics. And that was, low print runs on things like early Valiant titles, and people thought, or Death of Superman, which got mainstream coverage or whatever, and everybody was just buying up all these comics and just felt like they were printing money, and it caused everything to come crashing down. Have we learned nothing from the past? Apparently not, based on what you look at, politically, with things that happened in Germany in the 1930s and now what's happening here in the U.S. Apparently, no, we're too stupid to learn from our mistakes and learn from past history. But I'm gonna look at it and I'm gonna go, no, Dynamite. Like I said, fuck you. I'm not buying any of your books. I will tell people, don't buy Dynamite books. Don't buy their covers. Wow. I mean, I'm not really a person that ever is says stuff like this. I celebrate comics. I want everybody reading comics, but to that end, I want the comic industry to survive. And practices like what Dynamite is doing are going to kill the comic industry. It really is. Like, I know I'm sounding doom and gloom or whatever, and in some way, shape, or form, the industry will survive. Maybe it goes all digital or what have you. But there's no other word for it. This is predatory. 118 covers for 6 books. That's predatory. And we could break it down further, right? Like, take out those 2 issues that I mentioned that were previously released, and we just have 1 cover. So you're talking about 4 books with 116 covers. That's there's no other way to put it. That's predatory. And I will not support that practice. And I encourage other people not to support that practice as well. And I get it. Again, it's become a way to prop up sales and drive people to pick up things, and the whole idea of FOMO or whatever. But it's not healthy. It's not healthy. And I couldn't not say something when I saw that. I was like, what, 108? Like, they have 118 books coming out? Like, what the heck? Yeah. And then I went and looked at the number of titles, and I was like, well, wait a second. They only have 6 books coming out. How could it be 118 titles? And then I started going and looking deeper, and I was just I was flabbergasted. I could not believe it.
I would say to your comment, I collect Dynamite. I'm not gonna not read. I love my Dynamite. I love some Dynamite titles. I love Space Ghost. I love Vampirella. I collect Red Sonja. I collect the color bleed covers of their Disney comics that they do. I really like some. I like some of. I try to be consistent with my covers. So I got a pattern in terms of the covers that I buy from Dynamite. I focus. I will just, for each story arc, I collect the same cover artist. So I pattern it. I pattern myself that way. But I admit to a degree of hypocrisy, because I absolutely bitch about variant covers all the time, ratio covers all the time. With Dynamite, I figured out a way that I do it, because I like the creators and I like the characters, and but I mean, it's hard for me not to I mean, there's a part of me that 100% embraces what you're saying. It's just that there's also that addiction side of me that I just love these characters. But I hear you, man. I hear you. And there's a lot of people out there, I'm sure, who would 100% agree with you. And I guess it all varies depending on how addicted we are as collectors.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. This was a conscious choice that I made, and I made it years ago. And it was partly because of the variant covers. It was partly because some of the things that Dynamite was doing were directly supporting Comicsgate, and I made a conscious choice at that time that I don't care who the creator is or who the character is, I'm not going to buy their books and I'm not going to support them. And again, it sucks that I'm missing out on some of these stories because I've heard great things about Space Ghost, and I think David Pepose is a talented writer. Christopher Priest is a very talented writer. Gail Simone's done stuff over there. Jimmy and Amanda, yeah, there are creators that I support and I love their work. But again, I made the choice and I'm sticking to my guns. I just won't support them. I won't buy any of their books. Now, I'm not begrudging anybody that does. But again, I think that what they're doing is predatory and wrong, and we don't really have a lot of as comic fans. We don't really have much power other than by choosing not to support something, it goes away. But I'm not gonna. I don't hold it against anybody that wants to read Dynamite books. I mean, maybe Silverhawks is your favorite cartoon ever, your favorite characters ever, or Thundercats or whatever, and so you're going to be picking those up. I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong. I'm just saying for me, I can't in good conscience support Dynamite, and I hate that they're putting us comic fans in this position. It's not right. That's part of why I don't support them. Why I think what they're doing is wrong. Like the fact that I can't support these creators and I can't read these stories because I choose to not support somebody who's implementing these predatory practices. I don't like that you're putting me in that position, Dynamite, but again, it's a choice each individual person has to make, and you do what you feel is right. I'm not going to judge you. I'm judging Dynamite, and I'm saying what Dynamite's doing is wrong. So anyway, let's get back to talking about some of the other books that are coming out this week you might want to be on lookout for. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is up to issue 6, the Jason Aaron era. I swear, I said this last time, I want to read it. I want to get caught up. I hear issue 1's a great place to jump on. I've never read Turtles. Not really a Turtles fan per se. Again, it came along in terms of cartoon and movies or whatever after I was a little bit older and wasn't really interested. But again, it's a good jumping on point from what I've heard. Also, Ice Cream Man from Image, up to issue 43, very popular series. Violator Origin, issue number 5. In that Todd McFarlane Spawn universe. It's got art by Kevin Maguire, which you wouldn't necessarily think of him on a horror title, and Violator's definitely a horror title. So that was interesting to see. Recommend people picking that up. Book of Cutter, number 1 from Boom Studios, which is, I think it's a one-shot, and it's celebrating the 5th anniversary of the Slaughterverse, and it supposedly has a dark chapter introducing a brand new face to the sort of Slaughterverse, if you will. Maxine Slaughter. She's a former pack hunter, and she renounced her white mask to take up for the Black Order of St. George. So I've never read any of House of Slaughter or Something is Killing the Children, even though I have, speaking of variant covers, I have multiple copies of issue 1. With different covers. It's awesome. Because I knew that it was going to be worth something, so I picked those up. So anyway, if you're so inclined, it's a one-shot. Has a fantastic cover from Dan Mora, but the interior art is done by Antonio Fuso, and it's written by James Tynion and Tate Bromball, who are the writers of House of Slaughter and Something is Killing the Children. So again, if you're in that Slaughterverse, you definitely want to be on the lookout for that. Dick Tracy from Mad Cave Studios is up to issue number 7. Knights vs. Samurai, which we thought about talking about. It's up to issue 5 from David Dasmalchian. But it sort of feels like it's starting to drag, and there wasn't really anything new to talk about, so we didn't cover it. Also, Star Trek Defiant, number 23 from writer Christopher Cantwell is out this week as well. And I think that's it. Oh, one other Mad Cave title, Dark Empty Void from Zach Kaplan, about some people traveling into a black hole, a very small miniature black hole that scientists were able to create here on Earth and keep stable. And yeah, as you can imagine, bad things happen, and so they travel inside the black hole to try to figure out what's going on. That's out this week as well. All right. that does it for the books that you might want to be on the lookout for this week. Moment of truth, Rocky. Book of the week. Got 1, 2, 3 that you considered. What's your thought?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'm gonna have to go with uh, I'm gonna go with Redcoat. I'm going to go with Redcoat. I mean, I really enjoyed Sam and Twitch again. I thought that the detective work, the story is very compelling. Seasons issue 1 by Rick Remender is really good, but it's very much a slow burn. I suspect I'll probably have subsequent issues that I'll probably have pick of the week, but it was more setup than I would have preferred, although I understand why Rick Remender did, the creative choices that they made. Yeah, Hornsby and Halo was really good. Dust to Dust was fantastic. Was really good. Art was fantastic, but Redcoat just hit all the right buttons. It was a great art, great story. It was a one shot. It was I really enjoyed it. So I would go with Redcoat issue 9.
I always like to predict what you're gonna and yeah, I predicted correctly that time. I think that's the first time in like 3 or 4 weeks I was able to predict it correctly.
Yeah.
Didn't let me down on that one. A bit of a tough choice. Like String was amazing. Red Before Black, so good. I really enjoyed this issue of Exit City, my favorite issue of that series so far. But I gotta go with Dust to Dust. Seasons as well that you mentioned. That was a fantastic start. But I can't go with anything but Dust to Dust. This feels like an award winner to me. This feels like a comic for people who love comics, and everybody who reads comics should be reading this. I think it'll be a crime if this doesn't get nominated for an Eisner based on the strength of the art and the slow burn. We keep using that term, the slow burn storytelling and pacing that, like I said, I imagine it's going to start ramping up with the next issue with it becoming obvious that there's a serial killer stalking the people of New Hope. But I mean, J.G. Jones, his artwork is, from the first time I saw it in Wanted, like the level of detail, the level of skill that this man has is amazing. He's just legendary. He's an artist. Like other artists, when they talk about J.G. Jones' work, they're blown away. I don't understand how he can do that. He makes it look so detailed and real, and like his storytelling is so strong or whatever. Like just for a long time, he's been very well respected in the industry as a top talent. So to say that this is, above and beyond anything he's done before, the best work of his career, that's really saying something. But it feels like that with the choice of colors, with the detail. Just look at this opening page for this issue. The storytelling here. We see the crows. We see the rabbit, jumping around searching for food. We see the tumbleweeds. And then we see, Sarah Grange, the reporter from the Stringer from the WPA, trying to tell a story of the Dust Bowl and what have you. And you see all the detritus along the highway that people have dumped as they're traveling west. I mean, it establishes the aesthetic of the story so well, and the time frame and the time period and what's going on. And coming on the heels of issue 1, which sort of introduced us to the characters, to have this opening sequence, which you'll notice there's not a single piece of dialogue or, any exposition boxes, nothing. There's not a single word, there's not a single letter on this page, and yet is exceptional storytelling. So I can't in good conscience pick anything but Dust to Dust 2. Probably a little influenced, I have to admit, by getting a chance to talk to J.G. Jones this week and get an insight into, his storytelling process and the things that he and Phil Brom are trying to do. So, yeah, I'm going with Dust to Dust number 2 as my book of the week. So, definitely pick it up. Again, if you missed the first issue and your store doesn't have any copies, a second printing of issue 1 will be out on February 3rd. So, all right, that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. Be interesting to see if there's any controversy or blowback to me about my Dynamite comments. Again, you have a different opinion on it. That's perfectly fine. All opinions are valid. I'm just expressing my frustration and my worry for the health of the industry, especially with predatory practices like that. So again, apologies if I offended anybody. That's not my intention. But I gotta call it out. It's been a problem for a while, and I was just blown away when I saw that. 4 titles, 116 covers. My God. Yeah. Ridiculous. So anyway, that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. Don't forget DC Spotlight over on Rocky's channel, Comic Space Boom ! Over on YouTube, and obviously all the Comic Source content available on our audio feed. Just go to your favorite podcast platform or app and do a search for the Comic Source and subscribe. So that's going to do it for this episode. We appreciate you joining us as always, and we'll talk to you next time.
Catch you later.